The judge laughed when he saw the teen walk in wearing his daddy's suit, but he wasn't ready for what happened next. Nobody expected the kid in the oversized Navy suit to speak. He walked through the double doors of the Miller County Courthouse in Camilla, Georgia like he'd done it before, only the jacket didn't quite fit. The sleeves ran long, hiding most of his hands. His tie was crooked. The briefcase he carried was scuffed, like it had been passed down through a few lifetimes. But the way Elijah Carrington moved, calm, straight-backed, eyes locked forward like he was there for business. Inside the courtroom, the crowd turned, whispers buzzed. Who was this boy? A clerk's little cousin? Somebody's assistant? A kid who wandered in off the street? Judge Raymond Tolbert looked up from his bench. His reading glasses sat low on his nose. He didn't say anything at first, just smirked. It wasn't subtle, one of those sideways grins that says everything without saying a word, the kind of smile that makes your stomach turn. Elijah didn't flinch. He walked straight toward the defense table and opened the briefcase, pulled out 3 neatly stacked file folders and a worn copy of the Georgia Code. He placed them carefully, like someone lining up tools before getting to work. Tolbert finally spoke. "You lost, son?" "No, sir," Elijah said, voice steady. "I'm here representing my brother, Isaiah Carrington." A pause fell so heavy, even the courtroom clock seemed to hold its breath. The bailiff blinked. The prosecutor, Andrea Lindholm, looked up from her notes with a raised eyebrow. Someone in the third row stifled a laugh. Tolbert leaned back in his chair. "Representing? You mean observing?" "No, sir. Representing." Elijah held up a document, carefully notarized and signed. Isaiah filed a pro se motion requesting self-representation. He then designated me, under Georgia's lay representation allowances, to act as his representative. Tolbert's smirk widened. "Son, this isn't a mock trial. This is a felony case." "I understand." "You're 17. "Yes, sir." "You have no license, no formal legal training." "No, sir." Elijah glanced briefly at the gallery, then back at the judge. "But I've studied the law for 2 years, and I've read everything related to my brother's case, twice." The courtroom shifted again. No more chuckles. Just silence now. Tight, uncomfortable silence. Tolbert exhaled, slow and deliberate. "Well, we'll see how long that confidence holds." He turned to the prosecutor. "Ms. Lindholm?" She looked unsure. "If the paperwork's in order, it's legal." Strange, but legal. The judge shook his head and looked down at his docket. "This is a preliminary hearing. We're here to decide whether there's enough to proceed to trial. If your brother really wants you to speak on his behalf, I'm not stopping you." Elijah didn't smile, didn't move, just said, "Yes, Your Honor," and sat down. From the back row, Isaiah, his older brother, watched in silence. His hands were cuffed, orange jumpsuit wrinkled at the collar. But his eyes? They held something quiet, something proud. The clerk called the case. State of Georgia versus Isaiah Carrington. The room reset. Andrea Lindholm stood, began laying out the charges: burglary, resisting arrest, and possession of stolen property. "A simple case," she said. Mr. Carrington was caught red-handed, fleeing a home with electronics in his car. The arresting officer ID'd him on sight. No mention of the lack of fingerprints, no mention of the alibi, no mention of the anonymous tip that had led to Isaiah being pulled over in the first place. Tolbert nodded along. Everything seemed to move fast, too fast. Then Elijah stood up, calmly. "Your Honor, may I cross-examine the officer?" A flicker of surprise across Tolbert's face. "You may." The officer stepped up. Officer Paul Haskins. Big guy, 45, with the build of a linebacker and a voice made for radio. He looked down at Elijah like he was a science experiment. "State your name for the record," Elijah said. "You serious?" "Name, please." A few people in the back tensed up. Elijah's tone wasn't rude, just different. Like he wasn't asking, he was conducting. "Haskins, Paul Haskins." "And you said you saw my brother inside the vehicle with the stolen property?" "Yeah, flat screen TV in the back seat. 2 laptops. I pulled him over after I got the tip." "Right. This tip. Did you log it?" "No." "You said he ran?" "He tried. I stopped him." Elijah flipped open a file. "Then how do you explain this?" He held up a photo. Isaiah, face down, handcuffed, kneeling. time-stamped 5 minutes before the traffic stop was officially recorded. The courtroom stirred. Haskins blinked. Tolbert leaned forward. "Where did you get that?" "From a neighbor's ring cam. The arrest didn't happen during the stop. It happened before. That's an unlawful seizure." And just like that, the temperature shifted. But what came next would make the entire courtroom forget they were looking at a teenager. The silence didn't last. It cracked when Officer Haskins mumbled, "I must have gotten the time wrong." Elijah didn't even blink. "So your official report is wrong, your body cam was off, and you didn't record the anonymous tip," Tolbert interrupted. "Let's keep the tone respectful, Mr. Carrington." Elijah nodded. "Of course, Your Honor, just trying to get to the truth." People shifted in their seats. Whispers passed like wind between the rows. A few folks who'd come expecting to be entertained now sat up straighter. This wasn't funny anymore. From the defense table, Elijah picked up a second file. "I'd also like to submit a sworn statement from Mrs. Wanda Freeman, the homeowner whose house was allegedly burglarized." Judge Tolbert glanced at the document. "You had her sign this yourself?" "Yes, sir. Yesterday afternoon." "And what does she say?" "She says nothing was missing. She found her TV right where she left it. The door was closed. No signs of a break-in." Andrea Lindholm stood quickly. "Your Honor, this wasn't in discovery." Elijah responded without missing a beat. "She wasn't interviewed by police. I found her on my own." Tolbert raised an eyebrow. "How'd you get her to talk to you?" "I asked," Elijah said. "Politely." A couple of people chuckled this time, not at Elijah, but with him. The judge scanned the statement. "And she confirms that Isaiah was not in her home. She says she didn't see him at all that day. She only found out someone had been arrested in connection with her house from the local paper." Tolbert's eyes narrowed. His smirk was gone. Now he was thinking. The courtroom door creaked open as someone slipped in late. It was Mr. Klein, the town's unofficial court watcher, retired, nosy, always carrying a notepad. He whispered to someone in the back, "What's going on?" "Some kid is defending his brother," the woman replied. "He's killing it." Outside the courthouse earlier that morning, Elijah had stood by the cracked sidewalk with his brother's lawyer, well, former lawyer, just a few feet away from the rusted bike rack. That man, Elijah remembered his name was Dwayne Cotter, had looked down at him like he was trying to solve a math problem he hadn't studied for. "You can't do this, kid," Cotter had said. "Court's not some school project." "I know," Elijah said calmly, "but you don't believe my brother, and I do. Belief doesn't win trials." "No, but the truth might." Cotter had shaken his head, muttered something about watching too many movies, and walked off. Now, in that courtroom, Elijah made good on every hour he'd spent studying on his own. Late nights at the Camilla Public Library, listening to recorded lectures on his cracked iPhone, watching old trials on YouTube, reading from the stack of used law books he bought for $5 each at a secondhand shop in Albany. He didn't have a degree, but he had facts. He didn't have courtroom experience, but he had instinct. And right now, he had momentum. Judge Tolbert cleared his throat. "Let me get this straight. The arresting officer's timeline is off. The supposed victim denies anything was stolen. And there's no proof of forced entry?" "Yes, sir." "And you, Mr. Carrington, you dug this up on your own?" Elijah looked over at his brother, then back at the judge. "I had to. No one else was doing it." A heavy pause. The judge leaned back again, this time no smirk, just a crease between his eyebrows. "You said you're 17? "Yes." Tolbert sighed through his nose, almost like he didn't want to say what he said next. "Well, so far, you're more prepared than half the licensed lawyers who stand in front of me." Gasps, a few murmurs. Andrea Lindholm crossed her arms. She wasn't smiling. Elijah kept his expression flat, but inside, his heart hammered. Not from nerves, from focus. Every moment counted, every word mattered, and he wasn't about to slow down now. He stepped back to the table, slid the folders into a clean pile, and whispered something only Isaiah could hear. "You all right?" Isaiah nodded. "You're doing better than I ever imagined." Elijah smirked slightly, still looking ahead. "You just wait." Because if they thought the kid with the baggy suit was done, they were about to learn how wrong they really were. By the time Elijah stepped back up for his second round of questions, you could feel it. The whole room had shifted. People weren't staring at the suit anymore. They were watching him, watching how he spoke, how he never raised his voice, never stumbled, never looked unsure, not once. Elijah flipped open his notebook, hand-scribbled and dog-eared. It looked like it had seen some things. He turned to Officer Haskins again. "Officer, you testified you found 2 laptops in the vehicle. Do you have the serial numbers of those items?" No, Haskins said. "They were logged after the fact." "By who?" "Property Division." "Can you confirm they were reported stolen?" "I believe so." "You believe?" Elijah asked. Haskins hesitated. "Well, that's what I was told." Elijah stepped aside, grabbed another paper. "Because according to this report from the electronics store 3 blocks from my house, where those laptops were purchased, my brother bought them 2 days earlier using his own debit card." He held up the receipt. Haskins stared at it. Lindholm stood, objected. "Your Honor, I wasn't provided this during discovery." "You didn't ask," Elijah shot back, holding her gaze, "because you assumed he was guilty." Tolbert raised his hand. "Enough. Let me see the document." Elijah walked it over, calm, steady. Tolbert adjusted his glasses and read. No emotion showed on his face, but something flickered behind the eyes. Lindholm sat back down slowly. From the 3rd row, someone whispered, "That boy came with receipts." But Elijah wasn't finished. "I'd like to call my next witness, a man named Travis Dent." A man stood in the back, mid-30s, goatee, wore work boots and a faded mechanic's shirt. He raised his hand and walked to the stand. Tolbert looked surprised. "Was this witness disclosed?" "No, sir, but he's relevant. I can explain." Tolbert sighed. "Make it quick." Elijah turned to Travis. "Can you tell the court your relationship to Officer Haskins?" Travis shifted, looked at the officer. "He's my cousin." "And did he talk to you the night Isaiah Carrington was arrested?" "Yes." "What did he say?" "Objection." Lindholm stood. "Hearsay." "Goes to motive, Your Honor," Elijah argued. "Let me finish." Tolbert motioned forward. "I'll allow it, for now." Travis cleared his throat. He said, he finally got him. Said he was tired of seeing those Carrington boys walking around like they owned the place. Said Isaiah thought he was slick with the system, but wasn't smart enough to beat a uniform. Gasps, audible, sharp. Tolbert's expression darkened. Lindholm scribbled furiously in her notes. Elijah stepped closer to the witness stand, his voice quieter now. "Did he say anything about setting him up?" Travis swallowed. He said, "One anonymous call is all it takes in this town. Who they gonna believe? Me or some kid with a smart mouth?" Isaiah closed his eyes slowly. The courtroom went still. Elijah turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, I believe this demonstrates not just a pattern of misconduct, but a personal bias that directly affected the arrest and investigation." Tolbert leaned back. His face said he wanted to argue, but the words weren't coming. Elijah continued, "If we're calling this justice, then we need to stop pretending it starts with the uniform. It should start with the truth. My brother is not perfect, but he didn't do what they're accusing him of, and everything presented today proves that." Tolbert looked at Lindholm. "Do you have any rebuttal?" She hesitated. I'll need time to verify these new statements and evidence." Elijah was ready for that. "You can take time, but every day he spends in that cell is a day stolen from someone who hasn't even had a fair chance to be heard." Judge Tolbert didn't respond right away. He just looked at Elijah for a long time, like he was looking through him, and maybe for the first time seeing him clearly. But this hearing was far from over, and Elijah still had one move left that would leave everyone in that room stunned. Judge Tolbert called for a 10-minute recess, but no one left. Not really. Some stepped out to the hallway, but their eyes stayed locked on the courtroom like it was gravity holding them there. Even the janitor, who usually cleaned the benches around lunchtime, leaned on his broom and stayed by the door. Inside, Elijah sat alone at the defense table, calmly sorting through papers. No lawyer hovering, no team whispering in his ear. Just him, a stack of folders, and a tired briefcase with a broken latch. Across the room, Lindholm leaned over to whisper to Officer Haskins. Her voice was low, sharp. Haskins didn't look up. He just stared straight ahead, like someone who'd gotten caught playing with matches and burned more than he meant to. Tolbert stayed behind the bench, writing something down with slow, careful strokes. He looked older now, or maybe just exposed. The kind of look someone gets when a story they told themselves starts to fall apart. 10 minutes passed. Back on the record, Tolbert said flatly, tapping the gavel. Mr. Carrington, you may proceed with any remaining witnesses or statements. Elijah stood. He didn't rush. He took a breath, placed one last document in front of him, and looked directly at the judge. No more witnesses, Your Honor. Just a question. For the court. Tolbert raised his chin slightly. Go ahead. Elijah stepped forward. What happens when the system makes a mistake, and nobody says anything? The judge didn't answer. Elijah went on. What happens when a person gets arrested, not because of what they did, but because of who someone thinks they are? The room was still. I've read a lot of case law, Your Honor, more than most people my age. I've read your rulings too, from 2003 to now. You've sentenced men like my brother to 10 years for first-time offenses. You've thrown out motions for mistrials because of lack of sufficient cause. But I read one case from 2009, State v. Larrabee. Do you remember that one? Tolbert's face twitched, just barely. Of course. Elijah nodded. Then you remember the witness who changed her statement, the missing dash cam footage. You still let it go to trial, and that man got convicted. Tolbert cut in. That case was reviewed and closed. Elijah didn't back down. It was overturned 4 years later, after the man had already lost his family, his job, everything. Lindholm stood. Your Honor, is this cross-examination or a lecture? Tolbert didn't stop her. He just stared at Elijah. This isn't about revenge, Elijah said. It's about accountability. He turned back toward the gallery. How many people in this room know someone who's been locked up for something they didn't do? Hands went up, quietly, one by one. Tolbert's jaw clenched. You asked me earlier if I knew what I was doing, Elijah said. I do. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm standing up for my brother because no one else would, not even you. The words hung heavy, not loud, but heavy. Tolbert adjusted his robe, looked down, then finally said, The court will take a short recess. I'll issue a ruling within the hour. Gavel down. He stood and walked through the side door, but not before shooting one last look at Elijah. This time, no smirk, no sarcasm, just a face that looked like it had been cracked open. Elijah sat down slowly. He didn't speak. Isaiah leaned forward behind him and whispered, You all right? Elijah didn't look back. I think I finally made him listen. From the gallery, someone muttered, I don't know who raised that boy, but they sure as hell did something right. Outside, clouds started to roll in. The light dimmed through the old courthouse windows, casting soft shadows across the room. But Elijah, he looked brighter than ever. Still, the verdict wasn't in yet, and one sentence from the judge could still tear it all down. An hour felt like forever. The courtroom buzz had faded into a strange kind of quiet. Not tense, not relaxed either. Just waiting. Elijah sat alone, elbows on the table, hands folded, eyes focused on the door. Judge Tolbert had disappeared through. He hadn't moved much since the recess. Didn't check his phone, didn't fidget, just waited. Across the aisle, Isaiah sat taller now. The chains around his wrists had been removed by order of the court, a small gesture, but it meant something. At 2:03 p.m., the judge returned, robe dragging just slightly, face unreadable. He sat, shuffled some papers, then looked up. This hearing is now back in session. My ruling will be delivered orally and entered into the record. The air in the room thinned. After reviewing the evidence presented, some of which was, admittedly, unexpected, it is the opinion of this court that the prosecution has not demonstrated sufficient cause to proceed to trial. Gasps. One person clapped and was immediately shushed. Tolbert continued, voice flatter than usual. The charges against Isaiah Carrington are hereby dismissed with prejudice. You could have heard a pin drop. Then it all hit at once. Shoulders dropping, murmurs rising, the sound of someone crying softly in the back row. Isaiah looked at Elijah. Just looked. His mouth opened, then closed. Tolbert tapped the gavel once more. Mr. Carrington is free to go. Lindholm didn't even stand. She sat stiffly, biting the inside of her cheek. Officer Haskins got up and walked out without saying a word. And Elijah? He didn't jump up. He didn't pump his fist. He just stood slowly, gathered his notes, and placed everything back into the battered briefcase like it was any other school day. Tolbert remained at the bench, watching. Then he did something no one expected. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Carrington, would you approach the bench?" Elijah walked forward. The courtroom held its breath. Tolbert leaned in slightly, his voice low enough for only a few to hear. "You made me look in a mirror I've been avoiding for a long time." Elijah didn't smile. "That wasn't the point, sir. I just wanted my brother back." Tolbert nodded. "Well, you got him, and you might have changed more than you realize." He paused, like he wanted to say more but didn't know how. Then he added, "Don't stop." Elijah stepped back, said nothing. As the judge stood and disappeared again behind the wood-paneled door, people started clapping. For real this time. Not loud, but with weight. The kind of clapping that means something. A man in the back shouted, "This boy just made history in Camilla." Elijah walked over to Isaiah, who was already being uncuffed, and handed back his hoodie and wallet. They stood there face to face, no words at first. Then Isaiah shook his head, blinking back heat in his eyes. "You did the impossible." Elijah shrugged, fighting a smile. "Wasn't impossible, just ignored." They walked out of the courtroom side by side, the crowd parting like water. Some people nodded, some just stared. One older woman whispered, "Lord, let that boy go far." Outside, the sun had returned. Across the street, a local reporter was setting up a mic, but Elijah kept walking. Past the courthouse steps, past the news van, down the cracked sidewalk where his bike still leaned against the rack. Isaiah laughed softly. "You really rode your bike to court?" "Gas money ain't free," Elijah said, grinning. They both laughed. But there was one more person Elijah wanted to see. Someone who never set foot in the courtroom but made all this possible. Elijah's shoes crunched softly over gravel as he crossed the back parking lot behind the courthouse. His suit jacket swung open in the wind, tie a little looser now. He wasn't in a rush. He just needed to get there. A small brick building sat on the corner of Broad and Chestnut, faded sign, rusted mailbox. That was the Camilla Public Library. He pushed the door open and stepped into the smell of old pages and worn carpet. At the front desk sat Ms. Harmon, 60-something, glasses held together with tape, hair in a bun that leaned slightly left. She looked up from her crossword. "Shouldn't you be in school?" she asked with a teasing grin. Elijah smiled. "I was, kind of." She gave him a look, then squinted. "Wait, don't tell me. You did it." He nodded slowly. Her face cracked into a grin. "I knew it. I knew it. Been watching you sit in that corner every day like the books owed you money." "They kind of did," Elijah said, chuckling. She stood, rounded the desk, and pulled him into a hug that smelled like cinnamon gum and old bookmarks. "I'm proud of you," she said quietly. "Don't let this town shrink you down. You hear me?" "I hear you." They stood there for a second longer before Elijah glanced over at the familiar table in the corner. Same spot he sat for months, headphones in, notebook out, reading cases while the world kept moving around him. He walked over, ran his hand across the scratched surface. Ms. Harmon watched from the desk. "What happens now?" Elijah looked out the window, where Isaiah waited on the sidewalk, leaning against the bike with arms crossed and the sun warming his face. "I don't know," Elijah said, "but I'm not done." That afternoon, Camilla started seeing Elijah Carrington differently. Some still whispered, others stared, but more people just said his name with a kind of pause, like it meant something. 3 weeks later, the local paper ran a story. Teen legal prodigy frees brother in courtroom standoff. It wasn't quite accurate, but the message stuck. Officer Haskins quietly took early retirement. Lindholm was reassigned to a lower-profile circuit. And Judge Tolbert? He started showing up differently. Less smirking, more listening, and at the next town meeting when a teenager stood up to talk about starting a local education fund for kids who couldn't afford test prep or tutors, it was Tolbert who stood beside him. No robe, just a man trying to do better. As for Elijah, he didn't suddenly become famous. No scholarships fell from the sky, no law school offers came overnight. But he kept studying, and he kept showing up. Every week, back at the library, sometimes with a few younger kids sitting beside him, flipping through the same books he once pored over. Because Elijah didn't win just for his brother. He won for every kid who'd been told, "Not yet. You're too young," or "This isn't for you." He didn't wait for permission. He prepared, and when the moment came, he walked in, head high, suit too big, briefcase in hand, and proved that genius isn't about age or title or what they expect you to be. It's about truth and the courage to speak it, even when nobody's listening. Sometimes, all it takes is one person who refuses to stay quiet. So, if you believe in something, stand up, speak up, and don't let anyone's doubt decide your future. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And never forget, your voice can change everything.